everyone. In this video, we are going to go over some frequently asked questions that Alyssa from Compliance Tax gets. And I'm Kirsty, so let's get started. Alyssa, some of the questions you get from clients when you get started. I'm a US citizen living and working outside of the United States for many years. Do I still need to file a US tax return?
Yes, we get this question all the time. So a lot of people think when you're not in the US, you don't have any US source income that you don't need to file. But the US is like one of two countries that taxes based on citizenship. So you do have to file every year.
Isn't that for federal taxes as well as income taxes?
Yeah, so federal tax is the income tax. So you have to do that. And then depending on if you had any state sourced income or if you were living in a state for, a few months out of the year, you may also have to file a state tax return.
Okay, so if I am paying income taxes in a foreign country, I still would need to file a US income tax return.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I realize that after I've moved, and now I realize I have to file an income tax return, how far back do I need to go?
As far back as you haven't filed for. So if you've missed a few years, there's a few ways to get caught up. The IRS actually has a program called Streamlined Filing that we can use for clients to help them get compliant, up to the last 3 tax years.
Is that something you've dealt with clients before?
Oh yeah, all the time. A lot of accidental Americans too. They always do streamlined filing, so it's a great tool to get up to date with your tax returns.
Yeah, I'm sure taxes is the last thing you're thinking about when you're moving abroad, or you're purposefully trying not to think
Oh
about it.
yeah, no one wants to think about taxes when you're moving abroad,
No.
but still there.
What about due dates? Do due dates change country to country? Does US have any changing due dates for people living abroad?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. So when you live abroad, you automatically get a 2-month extension. So the normal due date is going to be April 15th. You do get until June 15th to file, and you don't need to do anything to claim that extension. You just check the box. You live outside of the United States. You don't get an extension of time to pay. So if you do think you'll owe
Mhm.
tax, or if you typically have to pay tax or estimated taxes, you still need to pay by April 15th. But you do have until June 15th to actually file your return.
Okay, so better to do it earlier, safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Um, okay, what if I've completed my tax return and I do have a balance due? How do I pay that tax liability?
Yeah, so the IRS has direct pay options. So you can, if you still have a US bank account, it's a lot easier to pay that way. You can also pay by credit card. But if you live in a foreign country and you've never lived in the US or you've closed all your US bank accounts, it can be a little bit trickier. So there's a few other banking apps that will allow you to create a US bank account. There's also like wire transfer fees and everything like that. So we can always help clients get sorted if they need a way to pay.
So if I was going through compliance tax and you've done my return, you're submitting it, and either I need to pay or I'm going to get money back, you could help me handle that payment with the IRS.
Yeah, we'll tell you guys like the best way to do it and how to get your refund the most secure way.
Great. And then how long does it usually take for them to accept a tax return?
With e-file, it's pretty quick. So I would say acceptance usually, within 24 to 48 hours. The refund usually will come through within 21 days, is what the IRS will say. Sometimes, there can be processing delays. If you also have moved recently and you've updated your address, there may be,
Mhm.
additional delays if the IRS is just reviewing or trying to verify your identity. But that's also stuff that we can help check for clients.
Great. What if I'm a US citizen that's married to a non-US citizen?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to handle this. If you're married to a non-US citizen, I would say the default status would be married filing separately. If
Mm.
you do want to file jointly, you can do that. There's an election that you can make to treat your spouse as a US resident for the whole year. You will need to get them a thing called an ITIN. So instead of a social security number, they would file a W-7 and get an ITIN, and that would allow you to e-file your return. Um, there is a little bit obviously of, work to do with that, but it's totally possible. Otherwise, you can just file separately.
And is that something you help clients out with, is obtaining that ITIN, getting them started?
Yes, you do have to send in, some documentation to the IRS, or you can use a certifying acceptance agent, but we can help clients figure out how to do the next steps.
I'm not on getting married.
Yeah.
Um, what if I'm a US taxpayer that's residing abroad, but I have a child who was born abroad? Can I
Yeah.
claim my child on my tax returns?
Yeah, if you have a child abroad, you'd want to register the birth, with the U.S. consulate closest to you. And then you can also apply for them to have a social security number. And so once your child has a social security number, you may be eligible for things like the additional child tax credit, which is a refundable child tax credit.
Oh, great. Well, what are my responsibilities as a green card holder if I've been absent from the United States for a long period of time?
Yeah, green card holders are basically treated the same as a citizen, so you would still want to file your tax returns even if you're not in the US. And depending on, the status of your green card, you may have requirements to travel back to the United States. So you'd probably want to check that and just make sure that your green card is still active and up to date. If you want to give up your green card, that's another conversation depending on how long you've had it, but that's also possible as well.
Okay. Um, uh, what about if I was a long-term resident of the United States prior to surrendering my green card?
Yeah,
What?
so that's when it gets tricky with the green card. So if you're a long-term resident, meaning that you've had your green card for over 8 years, you may be subject to exit tax, depending on if you hit the criteria for being a covered expat. So the difference would be,
Oh,
yeah, non-covered or covered, and a covered expat would have to pay the exit tax.
okay. And covered and uncovered is based on that time period.
Yeah, there's a few factors. So if you're a long-term resident, that's when you'd have to be worried about being a covered or a non-covered expat. If you're before the 8-year cutoff, it's a lot simpler.
Okay, good to know. What deductions or credits am I allowed on my US income tax return as a US citizen living and working outside in a foreign country?
Yeah, you're still eligible for, pretty much the same deductions and credits that you can get if you were, a US resident. So the standard deduction, you can still have that. If you have any mortgage interest on your primary home, you can do that if you're itemizing. Um, Yeah, pretty much all the same. But I would say the one difference is that you could also have a foreign tax credit. So if you are paying income tax to the foreign country that you're living in, that's also a credit that's available for you. And that will make a really big difference on your US income tax.
Okay. What if my foreign earned income is below the foreign earned income exclusion threshold?
Yeah, we get this question all the time. So you still have to file even if you're below the exclusion amount. A lot of people think if you're below 120,000 that you don't need to file a return, but you do still have to file the return to claim the exclusion. But the good news is if you are under that amount, you probably won't have any income tax to pay because you can exclude all of that.
Oh, great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Um, okay, last one. I live in a foreign country. How do I get a social security number? You told us how to do it for a baby, but how
Yeah.
do I do it for my dependents who also need to qualify?
Yeah, it's almost the same process, which is kind of interesting. So basically, you'll need to find the Social Security office closest to you. You can do that by going to the SSA website. They have like an international office lookup tool, and you'll have to send them probably, some documents, birth certificate, passport, things like that. But they can help you get your Social Security number, so you can file your tax returns and become tax compliant.
Okay, great. Oh, I thought of one more question. What about communication back from the IRS? If they have questions later on down the line after the taxes have been submitted, um, is that something that you can help field if I'm one of your clients?
Yeah, definitely. So that can be really intimidating to receive a notice from the IRS. But depending on the notice, they have little codes on them. We can figure out what they're asking for. A lot of times, the IRS, we see notices for taxpayers living abroad. They'll get like an identity verification request. Those are usually really easy to respond to. But of course, if you've never received one before, it can be really intimidating. So, yeah, definitely if you receive a notice, just let us know and we'll help you figure out what the next steps are.
Great. Well, I think you've answered all the questions I have for now. I'm sure we're going to do more videos on helping people get through their taxes abroad. But thank you so much, Alyssa, and I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Yes, we love answering client questions. So if you guys have any more, just always send them in, and we love to do these little videos. So we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.